Okay.
Okay, I am doing the CDL Class B pre-trip test in the state of Texas. We're going to come to the front of the bus. Bus approach. The bus is level. It is not leaning, and there are no leaks underneath. Starting at the top of the bus, we have 5 total amber clearance lights. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We have 2 amber warning lights, 1 and 2, and we have 2 red loading lights, 1 and 2. We also have our school bus lettering and reflective tape. All of these are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. The school bus sign is spelled correctly. We move down to our windshield and windshield wipers. They are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. The windshield is not obstructed, and the windshield wipers are not frayed. We will then come to our mirrors. We have 2 flat mirrors here and over there. We have 2 convex mirrors here and over there. We have 2 crossover mirrors here and here on their brackets, all of which are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts, and the mirrors are not obstructed. We will then move down to our headlight casings. We have a right and left. We have the high and low beams clear in color, right and left. We have 2 amber turn signals and 4-way flashers, right and left. And we have the casings themselves, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. We will then move down to the bumper and the license plate, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. There are no illegal welds on the bumper. Then we're going to come over to the passenger side front tire. The tire itself is worn evenly. There are no cuts, gouges, or bulges. The tread depth is 4/32, and the minimum inflation is 100 psi. The tire itself is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. We move down to our tire rim, the lug nuts, the hub oil seal, and the valve stem and cap, all of which are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. The tire rim does not have any illegal welds. The lug nuts do not have any shiny threads or rust dust to indicate they were loose. The hub oil seal is not leaking. If it were, there would be a spray pattern. And the valve stem, the cap is secure and there are no leaks. We then have our splash guard right here. It's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. We will then go under the hood. On the passenger side of the engine compartment, everything is belt driven. This is our serpentine belt. It is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. The belt itself is not frayed, and if I were to pull on it, there's no more than 3/4 of an inch play. Then we have our air filter and our life indicator. They are both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts, and the life indicator is in green. We then have our 2 AC compressors, our alternator, and our water pump, all of which are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts, and the water pump is not leaking. We will move down to our windshield washer fluid reservoir. It is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. It is not leaking and it's at its proper level. We move down to our suspension system, which includes the leaf springs, the U-bolts here and here, and the shock absorber, all of which are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts, and the shock absorber is not leaking. Then we have our brake system. Right here is our brake chamber, our brake lines and hoses, our slack adjuster, and this is our push rod and our slack adjuster, all of which are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. There are no leaks on the lines. Down here is our sight hole. It's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts, and the brake drum lining is not worn too thin. Then we will go over to the driver's side of the bus. Everything on the driver's side of the bus is gear driven. We're going to start with all lines and hoses. They're properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts, and there are no leaks. Then we have our coolant tank and lines, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. There are no leaks, and it's at its proper level between add and max. We then have our radiator and our fan blade here, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. The radiator is not leaking and the fan blade moves freely. We have our oil and transmission dipsticks, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts, and no leaks. To check the oil level, I would pull it out, clean it off, put it back in, pull it out, make sure it's between add and max, put it back in. All right, then we have our fuel filter here and lines. And we also have our air compressor and lines right here, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts, and there are no leaks. We have our power steering fluid reservoir and lines, and it goes down to our power steering pump, all of which are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts, no leaks, and it's at its proper level between add and max. Then we have our steering shaft here, our gearbox and lines, all of which are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts, and no leaks on the lines. Then our linkage system includes the pitman arm here, the drag link right here, the steering knuckle right here, and the steering arm here, and our tie rod right there, all of which are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. You would inspect your suspension and your brakes and your tires. You would the other side. That is everything on the driver's side engine compartment. Then we're going to go to our 2 fuse boxes or fuse panels. The doors are on hinges. The hinges themselves and all of the fuses are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, broken, no loose or missing parts. There are no extra fuses and the wires are not frayed. The doors open and close freely. We have our battery compartment with the door on the hinges. The hinges and the batteries are all properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, broken, no loose or missing parts. No leaks on the batteries, and there is no corrosion on the connectors. The door opens and closes freely. We have 2 stop arms on the front and on the back down there. They're properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. They are the proper color with 2 red loading lights, and the word stop is spelled correctly. Then we have 2 amber clearance lights and 1 red clearance light at the rear of the bus, 2 amber turn signals and 4-way flashers, and then we have 2 amber reflectors and 1 red reflector at the back, all of which are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. Then we have all of our windows, our driver windows and our passenger windows, and our 2 emergency exit windows, all properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts, and no obstructions. We have our school bus lettering and all reflective tape, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts, and it is spelled correctly. All right, then we're going to go underneath the bus. Underneath the bus, we have our drive shaft here with U-joints and U-hangers, all of which are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. Our exhaust system over here, it's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts, no leaks and no illegal welds. Our school bus frame, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts, and no illegal welds. Then we're going to come back to our rear suspension system and our rear brake system. Okay, so in here we have our rear leaf springs right here, our rear U-bolts here and here, and our rear shock absorbers, you can see right here, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts, and there's no leaks on the shock absorbers. Then we have our rear brake system, which includes the brake chamber, the brake lines and hoses, and the slack adjuster and push rod are on the back of the brake chamber. They are all properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts, and there's no leaks on the brake lines. We also can see our sight hole on the rear tire. It's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts, and then brake drum lining is not worn too thin. Then we have our rear dual tires. We have one and two. Both of them are worn evenly across. No cuts, gouges, or bulges. The tread depth on the rear tires is 2/32 of an inch, and our minimum tire pressure is 100 psi. They're both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. There is nothing in between them. Then we have our tire rim, our lug nuts, our rear axle cover, and we have two valve stems and caps for both the tires, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. There are no illegal welds on the tire rim. All of the lug nuts, there is no rust, dust, or shiny threads. If there were, it would mean they are loose. And there is no leaks from the rear axle cover. If there were, there would be a spray pattern. The caps are secure on the valve stems and there are no leaks. Then we have our mud flap, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts, and it's at least 8 inches from the ground. Then we're going to go to the rear of the bus. The rear of the bus, we're going to start at the top and make our way down. We have 5 red clearance lights. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 2 amber warning lights. And 2 red loading lights. And we also have our school bus lettering, reflective tape, and emergency door lettering. All reflective tape. Everything here is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. And this is spelled correctly. We then have 4 windows, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts, and no obstructions. The emergency door itself, the handle is functional. It has hinges here and here. Opens and closes freely, no obstructions, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. Then we have our 2 amber turn signals and 4-way flashers. We have 4 red brake lights and tail lights. We have 2 clear reverse lights. We have 2 red reflectors. And we have our license plate light, all of which are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. Then we have our license plate, our rear bumper, and our exhaust exit, all of which are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. There's no illegal welds on the bumper, and there's no obstructions on the exhaust exit. passenger side of the bus, I would inspect as I did the driver's side of the bus, but I'm going to point out the unique items that you would need to inspect. We'll start with our fuel door and cap. The door itself is on hinges. The hinges and the cap itself are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. And the cap is secure. This opens and closes freely, and there's no leaks. Underneath the fuel door, we have our fuel tank. This is the fuel tank, and this is the fuel cage, both of which are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. There are no leaks on the tank, and there's no illegal welds on the cage. From here, we can see our 2 air bellows. They're properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts, and they are not leaking. Right here we have our passenger door light. It's properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. Our passenger door itself has 4 windows. It also has hinges and the door rubbers, all of which are properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. The windows are not obstructed. The door rubbers are not frayed, and they open and close freely with no obstructions. Then we have our steps, which are properly mounted and secured to the subfloor, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts, and there's no obstructions. We have our step light and our handrails. They're both properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. Then we're going to identify our emergency equipment. Our fire extinguisher is right here. It is securely mounted, and it's rated, dated, and ready. We then have our body fluid cleanup kit here, our first aid kit here, and our emergency triangles here, all of which are securely mounted and they are fully stocked. We're then going to come down here. We have our aisle and our passenger seats, which are both properly mounted and secured to the subfloor. They're not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. And you will come through, pull on the backs of the seats to make sure that they are securely mounted to the subfloor. There is no obstructions in the aisle. And coming back, you will check the backs of the bottoms of your seats to make sure that they are secured to the frame as well. After doing so, we have our driver's seat and our safety belt. The driver's seat is properly mounted and secured to the subfloor, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. And the safety belt, properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts, and it is not frayed. Once you have identified those, we are going to perform a safe start. To perform a safe start, you will sit into the driver's seat, put on your safety belt. My parking brake is engaged, my gear is in neutral, and I will turn the key to the auxiliary position. I'm going to wait for all of the dash lights to turn off except for the parking brake. And then I will start the bus. At this point, I'm going to get up and I'm going to inspect all of the emergency exits. So I'll take off my seatbelt. I have 4 window emergency exits properly labeled. The handle is functional. It is audible, I can hear it, and it opens and closes freely without obstructions. Again, it is properly labeled. The handle is functional. It is audible, I can hear it, and it opens and closes freely without obstructions. You would also inspect these as well. Then we're going to go back to the rear emergency door. It is properly labeled. The handle is functional. It is audible. I can hear it. It opens and closes freely without obstructions. Then we have 2 roof hatch emergency exits right here. It is properly labeled. The handle is functional. It is audible. I can hear it. It opens and closes freely without obstructions. Then we're going to go back to our driver's seat. The shoelaces are untied. It's making me nervous. Okay. You'll get back into your driver's seat. Put on your seatbelt. At this point, we're going to inspect our student mirror. It is properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, or broken, no loose or missing parts. It is not obstructed, and it's clean and adjusted. We're going to move down to our windshield and our windshield wipers. Properly mounted and secured, not cracked, damaged, broken, no loose or missing parts. There are no obstructions. I can see that the blades are not frayed. They are functioning, and the spray is functioning as well. We can see here that our mirrors, all our flat, convex, and crossover mirrors are clean and adjusted. Okay. Then we are going to move down to our switches. We have our fans here and here. I can hear them. I can feel them. They are working. Our air conditioners. I can hear them. I can feel them. They are working. Our rear heaters, driver heater, and defroster. I can hear them. I can feel them. They are working. We move down to our strobe light. It is for use for inclement weather. It is on. It is working. We have our driver dome light here. I can see it. It is working. We have our student dome lights. I can see them. They are all working. I'm going to turn on my master flasher. Our no noise button is used for railroad crossings. It is working. Then we're going to come over here to our gauges. If you can see here, our temperature gauge, which says water, it is working, and normal reading is between 180 and 205. Our oil pressure gauge is working, and normal reading is 20 to 40 psi. Right here is our voltometer. It is working, and normal reading is 14 or less. And we have our 2 air brake gauges. They are working, and normal reading is 110 to 125 psi. All right, then we're going to do our light indicators. We have our right turn signal. It is working here. Our left turn signal is working here. Our 4-way flashers are working here. Our high and low beams, it is working here. My amber warning lights, I will push this button. I can see that it's working here and here. I can also see them in my crossover mirrors. And then my red loading lights, if I push my open door button, the red loading lights are working here, here. I can see them in my mirrors. I can see my stop signs are working out the window, and that my door is in fact open whenever I push that button. My horn, I can hear it. It is working. From this point, I will ask the instructor to step outside to check my exterior lights. She's telling me to check my left and right turn signals, my amber flashers, my high and low beams, and my red loading lights. She will then walk to the back of the bus, where you can see her in the rear view mirror. She's going to tell you to check your left turn signal, your right turn signal, your amber warning lights, your red loading lights, and also your brake lights. Once the instructor comes back on your bus, you're going to turn off all of your switches, turning off your master flasher, all of your air conditioners and heaters, headlights, and then you're going to turn your key all the way to the left. That beeping means that your child check alarm is going off and you have to deactivate it. To do so, the key needs to be to the left, and you walk to the back of the bus and push the button at the back of the bus. It says reset button here. Deactivate it. Then you go back to the front of the bus. At this point, you're going to step off the bus and chalk your tires, because your next thing to do is to perform an air brake test. Put the chalk in front. Back on the bus. Fasten your safety belt. You're going to turn your key to the auxiliary position. You're waiting for your gauges to settle and the lights to turn off. In the meantime, tell your instructor that your tires are chalked. And now that we can see that the tanks are loaded between 110 and 125 psi. Right here. At this point, you will push in your parking brake. You will wait for your gauges to settle. And you will set a timer for 1 minute, and making sure you don't lose more than 2 psi in 1 minute. After your 1 minute is up, you will press and hold your foot brake. Wait for your gauges to settle, and make sure you do not lose more than 3 psi in 1 minute. After that 1 minute, you will begin to pump your brakes, and your low pressure warning system will activate at 60 psi. And it did. You will continue pumping your brakes, and between 20 and 40 psi, your spring brake will pop. And it did. At this point, you will start your engine to build pressure. As the pressure is building between 60 and 70 psi, the low pressure warning system should deactivate. And it did. When your pressure reaches 85 psi, you want to make sure that the pressure builds between 85 and 100 psi in 45 seconds or less. So we'll watch our gauges. Whenever it reaches 85 psi, you will start a timer. pressure did indeed build between 85 and 100 within 45 seconds. The bus is safe to drive when the pressure is between 110 and 125 psi. After you've completed your air brake test, you will get off of your bus and remove your chalk. Turn to your seat again and put on your seatbelt. We are now going to perform our parking brake test. To do so, you say that your parking brake is engaged. Your gear is in neutral. You're going to put your gear into drive. You're going to accelerate to 10 RPMs. The bus did not move. The parking brake is working. Put your gear back into neutral. Pause it. All right. For the service brake test, you're going to say that my parking brake is engaged. You're going to put your gear into drive. You're going to push in your parking brake. And you're going to accelerate to 5 miles per hour. You will push on your service brake and make sure that your bus does not veer left or right. It did not. So our service brake is working. Pull your parking brake, put your gear into neutral, and this completes my pre-trip test. Thanks for watching.